Hi everyone, welcome to our Insider Risk Management webinar. Please note that this session will be recorded and the recording will be shared in the upcoming days, along with the deck and the FAQ document. So let's get started. So thank you for joining. I'm Shivani Mahapatro, and I'm a Senior Program Manager on the Microsoft 365 Security and Compliance Customer Experience Engineering team. I plan to cover the new announcements and recent updates in our risk management product, Insider Risk Management. If you have questions throughout the session, feel free to type them in the instant message window at any time. We have members from our team to answer these questions throughout the session. We will also save some time at the end of the session to have a Q&A portion, and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible. All questions will also be answered in a FAQ document after the webinar. And this webinar, once again, is being recorded, and we will post the recordings and FAQ at our community forum at aka.ms/mipc/webinars. So let's get started. Organizations need to be able to quickly identify and intelligently respond to a broad range of risks from insiders. We know from our own experience that it's hard to maintain trust without the right visibility, processes, and control. However, the effort required to identify these risks and violations is not trivial. I mean, think about the number of people accessing resources, communicating with each other, and the natural cycle of people entering and leaving the company. How do you intelligently determine what is an intentional risk versus an unintentional one? And how do you achieve this level of visibility while aligning to the cultural, legal, and privacy requirements you operate in? For example, truly malicious insiders do things such as intentionally stealing your intellectual property, turning off security controls, or maybe harassing others at work. But there are many other situations in which an insider might not even know they're causing a risk to the organization or violating your policies. For example, when they're excited about something new they're working on and they send files or photos to tell others about it. So there's a broad range of risks and violations from insiders that are displayed here on the slide. When we talk to customers, we often hear that the #1 issue that keeps a CISO up at night is insider risks. Research shows 93% of organizations are concerned about insider risks, whether it is intentional or unintentional. In fact, when we spoke to our CISO, Brett Arsenault at Microsoft, he shared that insider risk was one of the top worries on his mind. This, in fact, inspired us to build risk management solutions that Microsoft uses internally and make it available for our customers worldwide. When we have talked to customers, we have learned that insider risks are very hard to identify and manage due to the fractured and traditional approaches that have limitations. Some of these approaches include the use of one or more of these tools, such as UEBA, which is a user behavior analytics tool, UAM, user activity monitoring, and/or DLP, data loss prevention. The common limitations across all of these are they typically require complex setup and require agents to be deployed. They also provide limited enrichment, such as low visibility into content and low sentiment analysis. There's also limited signal correlation between the different alerts. and each individual alert tends to be transactional. And because of this, it might be prone to high false positive rates. These solutions also tend to have no integrated workflow beyond the SOC. People often mention, why can't we just use data loss prevention to protect against insider risks? When looking at any cybersecurity framework, you need to identify, protect, detect, and respond to risks. When looking at DLP solutions, it is really more focused on the protection of your content, which may cover transactional risks. The focus is what content to focus on and what transactional risks you want to block or block with override. When it comes to insider risks, the pivot is different. It is not about the content, it is about the user. When you look at human beings and the behavior of what they're doing, it is not just a single transaction, but a series of activities that help you identify the behavior and intent behind the actions. The focus of the Insider Risk Management product is on how to detect insider risk activity occurring and how to respond to it. Here's an example. A user logs in over a period of time or over a few days after hours from home and tries to send a classified document in email, and then tries to share this SharePoint link for the document, and then ends up copying the document to a USB device. In DLP, each of those individual actions may have been blocked or generated an incident or an event. But in insider risk management, the whole story is drawn from logging in after hours from home to all the DLP activity mentioned earlier, and then a story is written and stitched together for you and the whole thing to be identified as a risk. So a bit over a year ago, we announced the new Microsoft 365 solution, Insider Risk Management. This solution can help you and your organization to leverage intelligence to identify and remediate insider risks. We'll go over a quick recap on its features and design principles before moving to the new announcements. When designing the insider risk solution, we kept in mind that there is traditionally a variety of stakeholders and personas involved in managing risks within an organization. The solution supports collaboration workflows across 4 key personas. These may include compliance and privacy stakeholders, security, and HR and/or legal. So a combination of these stakeholders are usually involved in handling insider risks. As mentioned earlier, insider risk management helps to quickly identify and take action on the insider risks with an end-to-end approach. We have 3 founding principles as we design the solution. The first principle is around providing rich insights, which helps you to identify hidden risk patterns with customizable machine learning policy templates that require no endpoint agents to be deployed. The second principle is around privacy being built into the solution through anonymization controls to ensure risk data is appropriately managed without introducing biases while protecting employee privacy. And the third principle is end-to-end investigations and collaboration within the tool itself across security, HR, legal, and other stakeholders through integrated workflows. Now we will dive into the new features and capabilities that have been recently announced for the Insider Risk Management solution. Our recent innovations are centered on how to make insider risk easier and smarter. Getting started with insider risk management can feel overwhelming when considering a complex data landscape and signals flowing from all over Microsoft 365. We are making this easier by providing top-level telemetry meant to help drive a high level of awareness on aggregate potential risks seen today, allowing you to quickly narrow in on policies meant to address your biggest concerns. We will do a brief demo to show some improvements in the insider risk management analytics experience in the next few screens. So getting started, what are we doing to help make insider risk management easier? Here I am looking at a new day zero view of the insider risk management solution, where the aim is to easily help not only make it a conscious choice when to enable insider risk management capabilities, but to make the process seamless from surfacing organizational insights. Insider risk analytics can be activated with a single click via the Run Scan button, either from this homepage or from the insider risk management settings. Here I see several insights showing me aggregate organization statistics over the last 10 days of activity, which is a rolling window of the last 10 days. Data exfiltration patterns are certainly of concern. So let's get into a more detailed view of these data lake insights by clicking View Details. Using View Details, we can narrow in on a full picture of relevant data leak insights. Here we see not only a high-level set of insights indicating potential data exfiltration, but a ranked list of what types of potential data exfiltration activity is occurring at a high frequency, and a suggested risk mitigation to help you set up an insider risk management policy is also suggested here to address this risk. The next feature is around, customers often tell us we have implemented a data loss prevention solution to try and address insider risks, but the noise and alert fatigue is just too much. And correct, solutions such as DLP are focused on identifying and protecting content, essentially transactional activity risks. So they aren't meant for the complexity inherent within insider risks. Identifying insider risks is not just about looking at the content activity. To truly get an understanding of the user intent, it is critical to not just focus on the transactional activities, but to correlate these related activities over time. This is where insider risk management shines, and with this release, we're making the solution even smarter. We have released a sequencing model which looks at a series of activities to determine potential risk. For example, a user may download a set of documents, rename the documents to potentially evade detection, and then copy them to a USB device. With the sequencing model, the system is now able to detect these sequences for you, going above and beyond what traditional transactional techniques like DLP can provide. This not only improves the fidelity of detections, but also greatly reduces the work that the analyst or investigator must perform. So we'll go into a little bit of a demo for the sequencing feature. Here we're looking at an alert which indicates a potential sequence. And the sequence of events indicates that not only have files been potentially extracted, but a bad actor may have attempted to hide their tracks afterwards, which may capture a new type of intent. So we will start with narrowing in on the detected sequence. So by clicking on Show for Activities in Sequence, it expands this view so that we can see that over a period of time, files were downloaded from SharePoint, and then they were renamed and printed and then deleted over a period of 2 months. Each of these events on their own may have had a lower risk score, but put together can suggest a specific intent and be scored higher within the insider risk management solution. So we can further open an expanded view. And this view pulls up, a bubble chart within the user activity tab, and we can see the high risk events that have happened over a time period right after a resignation date has been set. So let's open up the sequence. And here we see the sequence highlighted among all the risk activity. And you can notice that the sequence can be visually used to even connect the dots, indicating related events. So if we click on the specific sequence, again, we see a broken out view showing the entire sequenced events mapped together. Another intelligence feature that we recently introduced is around cumulative exfiltration detection, which uses machine learning models to help you identify when user exfiltration activities exceed the organizational averages when measured over time and over multiple exfiltration activity types. Insider risk management analysts and investigators may use cumulative exfiltration detection insights to help identify exfiltration activities that may not typically generate alerts, but are above what is typical for their organization. Some examples may be departing users slowly exfiltrating data across a range of days, or could be detection of low and slow sophisticated activity patterns, or perhaps when users repeatedly share data across multiple channels more than usual for data sharing across the organization. This cumulative exfiltration detection is enabled by default when using the data theft and data leak policy templates within the Insider Risk tool. We're also happy to announce that we have added new indicators from SharePoint, Teams, endpoint devices, and Microsoft Cloud App Security. You can opt in for these new indicators by visiting Insider Risk Management and heading to Settings and selecting the policy indicators, and then include these as part of the existing or new Insider Risk Management policies that you may set up. I'll go into more detail into each of these indicator categories. So several new indicators have been built to capture signals within SharePoint Online, with 3 new categories of SharePoint-based risk events. The first is around SharePoint access-based indicators, which captures potential risky events involving priority site access or events involving access to sensitive or priority resources. The second category is around SharePoint file and folder deletion indicators, which now captures a wide set of deletion activities. And the last category is around sensitivity level events, which have been added to determine when sensitivity labels have been either removed or a file sensitivity label has been downgraded. We can also track sharing and access-based events within Microsoft Teams when interacting with individuals outside of the organization. In addition, we have added a new file archive activity indicator within the device indicators for onboarded Windows 10 devices. We're happy to announce that we have also introduced seamless integration with Microsoft Cloud App Security, which can further expand our visibility into third-party connected cloud applications. For customers using MCAS, insider risk policies can now paint a picture of mass download or sharing of events. Attempts to hide device IP address, events involved in using a third-party application from terminated users or employees, or multiple failed logins, which all could indicate breach attempts. So once again, these are available in the settings of Insider Risk Management. The Azure Active Directory account trigger for any departing employee policy will also allow you to have a safety net. So if your HR connector information is not filled in for a departing user, we will bring the user into scope of the policy when their account is deleted in Azure Active Directory. That way you know if critical business info was compromised at departure. The option will show up in the departing employee data theft policy wizard, and you can choose the triggering event between the HR connector or the Azure Active Directory trigger. The trigger activity will show up in the user activity timeline if it has brought the user into scope for monitoring. We also introduced a built-in triggering event based on daily aggregated user activities as an alternative to DLP policy as a trigger. The data leak policy will start assigning risk scores when specific thresholds are detected for activity related to the following indicators, such as large volume of files downloaded from SharePoint or emails sent to recipients outside the organization. These are applicable to the general data leaks policy and the data leaks for priority users policies. If a day's aggregated activity for a user crosses the predefined threshold for an activity type, the trigger will show up in the user activity timeline. We've also improved the experience around manually adding or removing users from the policy scoring scope. Add users has been moved to the policy tab, and you can now add multiple users to policies to bypass the triggering event requirement and start scoring user activity. The reason entered will appear in the user timeline with the date the user was added. And users can also be imported through this method with a CSV file of UPNs if there are a high volume of users to add manually. We have added a teaching bubble to the users tab to inform customers that add users has moved to the policies page. Additionally, from the users page, there is a new option to remove users from a policy, and this will stop scoring activity for a user, typically within 10 minutes. And any alerts and cases for the removed users will not be deleted from the Insider Risk Management tool. The policies page now includes warnings and recommendations to inform the customer if their policies are not configured to effectively score user activity and generate alerts. Policy Health Management provides warnings and recommendations that will appear with details about suggested actions for each policy. Some example warnings or recommendations may include DLP policy is not selected or is not set up to create high severity alerts, or the HR connector is not sending data appropriately, and users have not been selected in a given policy. So these are all examples of warnings or recommendations that you'll now see within the solution itself. We've also made enhancements to the policy wizard, which will now appear when creating a new policy or editing an existing policy. These enhancements include a new look and feel to select a policy template with additional descriptions and overview of prerequisites for each policy template type, and the experience enhancements throughout the wizard to more easily select and edit selections, and warn against missing policy configuration selections that may impact the effectiveness of the policy at the time of creation or editing. The Content Explorer is a critical tool we use in the Insider Risk Management product when analyzing risk events to get a full picture on the content captured by the Insider Risk policy. Several enhancements have been made to Content Explorer, making it easier and faster to use and more predictable for longer running tasks or unexpected situations. For example, grouping related content within files has now been improved, making it easier to quickly narrow down interesting content during risk investigations. And we've also added progress indicators for long-running tasks and improved error handling within the Content Explorer. In the Insider Risk Management settings, you can customize risk score impact sent to unallowed domains, allowed domains, and third-party domains determined by your organization. For example, activity with unallowed domains will result in higher risk score impact, while activity with allowed domains will be ignored. We have recently simplified the management of domain lists in global settings by introducing the support for wildcards as a domain matching criteria. This will allow admins to create a wide range of domain criteria with just a few entries, and this simplifies the creation and management of these lists. Once again, these domain settings can be found in the global settings of the Insider Risk Management solution. Insider Risk Management is tightly integrated with the Microsoft Information Protection capabilities and can provide insights based on labeled and sensitive data. We've made enhancements to improve alert fidelity by leveraging recent changes in the classification platform. These improvements have been around the classification model and improved definitions of sensitive info types. These enhancements will lead to reduced false positives for sensitive info types classified in the content included as part of user insights. And this is enabled by default for your tenant and needs no extra configuration. We understand that removing bias from the process is an important aspect of having a trusted insider risk management program. This means that you need to have an audit trail of your insider risk analysts and admins to be able to identify potential red flags. To address this, we are now rolling out a new auditor role, Insider Risk Management Auditors, which organizations can use to audit the actions of all their insider risk analysts and admins and maintain the integrity of an independent audit control. And And the last feature that we wanted to announce today is around creating a record for an insider risk case in ServiceNow through Power Automate. This template is for organizations that want to use their ServiceNow solution to track insider risk management cases. When in a case, insider risk analysts and investigators can create a record for the case in ServiceNow. And you can customize this template to populate the selected fields in ServiceNow based on your organization's requirements. And you should be able to see these Power Automate templates available in the insider risk management settings. So if you're not using insider risk management yet, we ask you to please consider exploring these capabilities through a Microsoft 365 E5 trial. And we also have, different resources available to you, such as a learning path with interactive guides available for you. This next slide also shows some useful resources for you, and we'll be sharing the deck so that you have these links available. And after the webinar session, we suggest that you explore these tools. We have a really wonderful series of YouTube videos describing insider risk management and going through the capabilities. We also have a link here to our Ignite 2021 session. And then there's various other resources that you may want to check out. With that, we have time for some Q&A, and I thank you for your time and attention and interest in learning about the new insider risk management capabilities.
Yeah. Thank you, Shivani.
Awesome. Thanks, Shivani.
Yeah.
Shivani, if I could ask a question here, this one came up over our Q&A, and I think this could deserve a little bit of dialogue. How can we talk about what types of capabilities insider risk management has for protecting not only data that is just within Microsoft 365, but a wide variety of solutions outside of Microsoft 365? Can we talk about maybe what types of other systems that we can leverage to bring in signals from all over the place?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of those such signals would be a HR connector to understand, departing employee data. So this HR connector is basically a simple CSV method where it's a file-based connector. You upload that data from pretty much anywhere, and you can understand when an employee is leaving the company and use that for the departing employee data theft policy. There's also another connector available which looks at badging data. So we understand that digital risks are important to monitor, but also physical risks of, maybe an employee accessing the building at odd hours, outside of office hours. Maybe they're trying to access, more restricted areas of the building. Maybe they're even trying to access the building after they've been terminated from the company. So this badging connector allows organizations to monitor that data as well. And we would love to hear your feedback as well. As we continue to build a solution there, we are thinking of expanding more and more connectors. And we are actively working on building that roadmap out. So we would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Awesome. And I think even in addition to that, like today we went over the MCAS integration today, so really helping us look at activity in third-party cloud environments. So very often, if you're using one of the popular third-party cloud solutions for doing something like holding, where you have a lot of external data that you're leveraging with sharing with external partners and such, we can go through and see things like mass download signals and mass sharing signals and things like that, which is really tapping into the strength of the MCAS platform. So,
yep,
awesome.
absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's great, and I love how you put that. And I think the magic of this comes when all these come together, right? So we could have HR signals happening in one environment, and we could have other signals coming from where we see risky activity happening within M365, and with Insider Risk, we kind of see the whole picture painted together around a user. So very good. Awesome. Another question has come in here about understanding how does Insider Risk Management really integrate with Microsoft data loss prevention?
Yeah, so as mentioned, the data leak policy uses a DLP rule that you might have already set up for your organization as a trigger to bring, employees into scope of the insider risk policy. But what we just announced was, we've released the capability to also have native triggers where basically a mass download of SharePoint files or unusual activity could be a trigger as well for the data leakage policy. So DLP and insider risk management are coupled because the foundational alert activity is shared within the two solutions. So it's not like, you should be seeing different activity in DLP versus insider risk. Insider risk management is built on the DLP activity to provide you a more end-to-end view on a user. And Kevin, do you have anything else to add to that one as well?
No, I think you summarized that right. I think it's so critical here, and this actually I think ties into another question here about how quickly, understanding, do these policies, do they get evaluated in real time? Is this something that happens over time? And just understanding really where this fits between where we use insider risk for versus data loss prevention as well. The data loss prevention, of course, adding towards our signals. DLP is certainly still, I think, a very strengthened application for in terms of trying to provide that instant response back to a user to prevent them from accidentally making that mistake and revealing content that they shouldn't have done. But insider risk is really meant to go through and attack someone that has true intent to pull information out of your organization and collect those signals over time and really give you all this information in one pane so that you can go through and make an appropriate decision there, which is very often a human decision.
I think one thing I would like to add to that, because the question asked around, is it close to real time, and what time range or time frame does it monitor for a user? So that is configurable by you within the settings of Insider Risk Management. You can select a time frame that is appropriate for your organization, but essentially what happens is when a user comes into scope of an insider risk policy, it can provide you with that historical context of the activity leading up to a departure, but it also looks at activity looking forward. So it gives you that kind of, holistic view on, once a user comes into a scope of the policy, you can look back and get historical context, but you can also, start monitoring that user's activity because they met a risk threshold and were brought into scope of the policy with the trigger activity. So hope that clarifies that as well.
No, and that's such a great point to bring out, I think, in terms of really the strength of the platform here, right? Because when we get something like an HR signal that someone is putting in a resignation event, for example, such a normal time that I think we've seen in history that this is when data theft would occur very often. And being able to look back in time before that signal happened, right, and see the last 90 or 180 days of activity. So such a powerful ability to kind of pull that into view, so that you're not waiting for that event to happen until you start, that you basically miss anything that happened up until that point, that you can go back in time and kind of get all that background, as well as future facing monitoring up to that configurable level of potentially up to 30 days or so.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing that I wanted to call out is, when I was presenting, I did mention that, privacy being built into the solution is a fundamental principle, guiding principle, and we want to make sure that you understand that, this is an opt-in solution. So once insider risk management is enabled in your tenant, you have the opportunity to add users that you would like to, add to the policy. So it is totally configurable. It's not like once you turn on insider risk management, it's monitoring all users. If you want to monitor all users, it's up to you, up to the insider risk management admin to choose that option. And even then, after a user is added to a policy, they have to meet the risk threshold, right? They have to meet that triggering event risk threshold to come into scope of the policy. So just wanted to clarify that one as well, where it is an opt-in solution.
Absolutely. No, great point. Looking here, so one question kind of comes into, how do we, what types of things do we have to protect the roles? And then there's kind of a question about basically, can you use something, a solution like Azure Active Directory privileged identity management for protecting the insider risk management and communication compliance role groups today? And I can address that one actually directly. That is something today that that as of right now, those role groups would be populated and managed through the through Office 365 centric interfaces in the Security Compliance Center, or other areas where we can manage those role groups, but currently today are not integrated with Azure Active Directory privileged identity management. However, this is a great tie-in that, like, when you're monitoring activity that happens and trying to protect against the risk of misuse of those credentials, we did just discuss that watch the watchers capability of getting a full picture of someone's audit signals there. So addressing that question, but excellent question here about on what we're able to do with the roles in terms of looking at things like privilege misuse. Question, trying to see if additional questions here that have come through. And we will, and just so everybody's aware, we will get to questions even afterwards. We will go through and get answers to all of these and make sure that we can publish them with the webinar at the very end, several days after the event. There's a question here about anything on the roadmap to mention for, see here. Anything, I think there's a question just about like what types of, maybe we can just kind of reason over what types of reactions can you do when we see insider risk activities? What are the major things that we generally do at this when we're looking at a picture of our different users and have some that are showing insider risk events? What's the most popular approach of what you might do?
Yeah, I think it varies from organization to organization, but I can share what capabilities we have within the tool today. So essentially, you would start by setting up a policy. And once users come into scope of that policy, you would see activity, and those alerts would come up. And we usually suggest that you have dedicated analysts reviewing those alerts. And as you go through that alert triage experience, you can choose to create a case if it is determined as high risk for the organization. So once a case is created, an insider risk management case is created, you can invite more collaborators. So maybe you need to invite folks from HR, or even just maybe the manager of that employee, to just understand if this is part of I guess the daily job, and that's why that employee might have downloaded a significant amount of files, and so just to get more information right around the case. So that case management experience can be done within the tool itself, that collaboration piece. And if the case needs to be escalated even further, insider risk management is tightly integrated with advanced e-discovery. So the cool, neat thing is that, basically everything that is discovered and found till date in the insider risk management tool will be neatly packaged up and can be sent over to the advanced e-discovery case. And this is really awesome because if you need to create a e-discovery case, all this content and data that has been discovered in the insider risk tool would be shared with legal for the e-discovery case. So that capability is also available within the tool as well.
Perfect. How about, given the sensitive nature of working with insider risk management cases, often we don't we want to be able to provide the capability that you could do that analysis without using a bunch of personal bias in terms of who that particular user is. So in terms of from a privacy angle, is there the capability to anonymize user data?
Yeah, really great question. Yes, as I mentioned earlier, privacy was a founding principle for the solution. So we do provide pseudonymization controls, and this can be found in the settings. So basically, you can go in there and choose to turn pseudonymization on. And so what this would entail is that when an alert comes up, the user's name and details will not be shared. And so that the analyst can just review as appropriate. But of course, we understand that if an alert needs to have more investigation, further investigation is needed, then at some point you can choose to remove that anonymization layer if the case needs to be escalated. But for alert triage and looking at content and so forth, that setting control is available today.
Awesome. And when you said pseudonymization, that kind of means that you can see different usernames, but they would be what we stamp an ID on there, so you can kind of tell them apart. Is that kind of the idea?
Yes. So if pseudonymization is turned off, you would get information from Azure Active Directory, such as the user's name, what department they're in, just some high-level information about that user. But if it's turned off, those details will not be available. So it's once again configurable within the settings.
Perfect. And then being able to have that the kind of the replaced name with something that's more of a pseudonym allows you to kind of see. Still, you can see trends involving a single user where you can tell the users apart, but you won't associate that with an individual's name.
Yeah, and another thing actually regarding this privacy question is that this solution is also based on role-based access control. So we have RBAC in place, and you need to have specific insider risk management roles to even access the solution. So that's another key piece as well. It's not like the, any admin of your tenant can access the solution. You need to have the specific insider risk role group.
Right. Okay. No, that's excellent. And I don't know if we can recap over the major kind of roles that you might have, but it sounds like the ability is in there in order to build some of those granular permissions for what are the most popular groups that would be involved in evaluating insider risk management case, with the addition, of course, of that kind of exciting addition of having the new auditor role that allows you to watch the watchers. So something super interesting.
Yep.
Awesome. See if we have any other questions. One quick question here. Anybody that has the recording is certainly available, will be available after the end of the session. We will post this in several days so that you can go through and see this. So trying to see if there's one final question. We've got a few minutes here left. We had a question here about the description of the controls has been around workflow, investigation, collaboration with other teams like HR. How can Microsoft DLP block actions based off the insider risk management risk of a user, or prevent this? I think it's back into like how does this integrate in with our compliance solutions so that we are also is it possible to stop insider risk events before they happen?
I think at this time, no. But as we build out the roadmap, we are thinking of integration points with the rest of the Microsoft compliance stack. So definitely be on the lookout for some cool key integration points there. Yeah.
And keep in mind, right? If there's a simple thing that's a very easy signal, right? This is something that not taking away. We want to complement the data loss prevention solution. This is not a we don't compete with our own solutions in this sort of way. So this is an area where we're going to capture signals and get a full picture where someone that literally has that malicious intent. In addition, I think there is the ability, since we have that integration with Flow, you could have some automatic enforcement or automatic responses if you're, I think over time, if you wanted to take some activity within the Flow integration, but I think that would still be something. This is something where it's very tricky, and often if you're looking at a case, right, this is something where you have to be a little bit cautious on this and really look at this event and get a view of this to see how you want to take that human response, given the extreme sensitive nature of an insider risk event potentially happening. This may not be the thing you want to, if, for example, you had someone that was slowly having intent to steal company secrets, that may not be your first reaction may not be to go up to this person and say, hey, stop doing that. You might be needing to kind of build and get an idea about where this is coming from. So also, I think one final question, I think here, Shivani, all of these changes, what is the period of time that this has basically been since our last update? I think someone was, one of the participants here had a great time seeing your session, the last what's been updated session. So what could we say the time frame of our updates has really been around?
Yeah, so usually our updates are aligned with significant milestone events such as, Microsoft Ignite, Microsoft Inspire, And so usually you'll see kind of like, feature announcements go out around those timeframes. I don't know if I'm missing any,
Perfect.
But Ignite, at least Ignite and Inspire are the big ones on top of my mind. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, so just a couple of minutes left. Should we just leave again with the where should people go to learn more about insider risk?
Yeah, let me see if I can go back to the
I actually put in the chat window some good
okay, cool.
So there's
fantastic.
Insider Risk Narrative Guide that we published. Also, we have our great insider risk videos that cover, short videos cover exactly what Shivani just walked us through here. Also, we have our deployment acceleration guides that are available for everyone to understand how to plan an insider risk deployment. And then last but not least, you can always go back to this webinar and look at the recording.
Fantastic. So a wide variety of options here for going through and learning more. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Shivani. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you all for your time today. And we really do hope that you test out these new capabilities and, share your feedback with us. We're continuously improving this product. So looking forward to your insights.
Yeah, and also I put in the chat window, this is the first out of a webinar series that we're making to cover what we announced at Ignite. So make sure you will mark your calendars for the next webinars.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.